welcome. I am Udion, and in this episode here, we're going to see how a compressor works and how we can use it to shape a kick drum and how this will change its tone, basically. So, first things first, in order to use a compressor to shape a kick drum, it's important that we understand how the compressor is going to work. So I think the best method is to use a spectrum analyzer. And let's see if we can get a sound there. And let's take the volume off as well, so we don't have to sit and listen to that bouncing. So this here is a spectrum analyzer. If you follow my other videos, you will be fairly familiar with it. We're working in this a lot. This is its maximum here, this max line. And keep an eye on that because we're going to affect that now. And a compressor, basically what it does, it amplifies the tone, the harmonics of a sound, and it reduces the fundamental, well, to a certain point. Because if we say we have a threshold here, if we say it's even lower, then it's going to it's going to reduce the amplitude from a certain uh, level. And if you see here, we have a threshold here. And this is the threshold where it will start to, let's remove the makeup there, because the makeup, it's going to automatically gain. But let's focus on the threshold. So you see down here, we have a dB. We can move this down, and you see how the entire curve gets lowered and now brought back up to live. And this is the ratio here. This is by how much it's going to reduce the sound. But let's down here, you know, you have this information, and you can now this the dB, the level that's interesting. And if I'm this is the let's take the threshold. This is the peak of this kick here at 55 hertz. This is minus. You see now it's peaking here at minus 8 dB. And if I take it down here a little bit, so this is minus 25 dB around. So if I move the threshold to minus 25 dB, then everything that is in the ratio to max, and take this to 25 dB. So that's it's saying that everything above 25 dB here, go ahead and bring that level down to, because we have it to the ratio infinity here, that's a limiter. Then we set a limit here. When we set at 22 dB, nothing is allowed to go over that that level. So reduce the volume to achieve that, right? And you might be wondering, okay, so if a compressor is reducing the amplitude, then how is it going to? Because what we want to achieve when we use the compressor is we want to have a perceived increasement in perceived loudness, right? We want it to be louder. But what it's going to do is going to say, okay, everything over a certain dB here, reduce it, and then we use the gain to take the levels back up. So, and look at the harmonics here. So and then we take this to bring it back up to where it was originally. There we go. So now we have what basically what happened here is that the fundamental up here, it was reduced, and then all the other, when we put the gain up here out, all of these other frequencies here were being amplified, right? So what happens is that the sound will sound more fatter because we have, so the tone of a sound is the fundamental plus the harmonics. And basically what we are doing is we are amplifying the harmonics of a sound, or the other frequencies that were lower in the sound is now in relationship to the loudest frequency louder, if you get what I mean. And so the original sound is like that. It has a higher peak here, and if so, here is the on and off for the compressor. And if I reintroduce the compressor, these other frequencies down here are now louder in relationship to the peaking frequency. And we can also see that instead of if we have a look at the waveform, and we're going to use that anyway. So LFO tool is a good little plugin for that. And this is the waveform. And then if we introduce the compressor and set it to maximum, and then have a makeup gain, you see how it flattens the sound. And then if we turn it back off like that, then now it's reintroduced to the maximum. It's completely flattened out all of the harmonics on the sound, and compress the fundamental basically. But that's I mean, this is an extreme settings. We're not going to use these extreme settings here, but so let's go out the threshold and set this back to 0. Okay, so let's grab ourselves a new compressor. Just make sure that we start with something fresh here. Okay, so let's move on now. When we have some basic understanding of how a compressor works, so let's start shaping this kick drum here. And the first thing that we are going to need to understand. Oh, two more things about the compressor before we move on. It has an attack and release. The attack is when the compressor will kick in. So if we have like here 2 milliseconds here, it's going to wait 2 milliseconds in the beginning here before it starts compressing. And the release is after how long is the compression going to stop. So, and the first thing that we want to understand when we're going to do or we want to have, or the knowledge we need, is where the transients are on the compressor. Because normally we want to allow the initial transient to pass through uncompressed, and then we want to compress afterwards. So what we do is we set the ratio to max and then threshold to max. Now this is not always true that we want to have the initial, but we need to know where the transient live in order to shape its transient. And I will talk a little bit later on different effects we can use here to get a more smooth or more punchy kick, but it's a little bit later. Hold on now. Hold to your hats. Let's first things first. We need to find the initial transient, and if we look at the waveform here now, I set the ratio to max, the threshold to max, and it's completely flattened out this waveform. And then we move the attack up until we should get some volume as well. Now we need to hear what we're doing and also look here. And then we move the attack until we can hear the initial transient, but not the body. So here the body is coming in, and we just want that initial little, clicky sound. And you can look here as well on the waveform that the initial transient here, they are getting passed through totally uncompressed. So it's passing through, and then here the compression is starting. So the next step is to move this threshold up to where the kick comes back to live. Let's see, not too loud volume. And then something like that. We're not making this is just a demo, so let's just move forward. But that's good enough. The sound is pretty natural. Sounds alive. If you listen down here, it sounds bad and it looks bad as well, the waveform. So we just want it to be healthy. Like that. And then when it comes to the Should we do the release? No, let's. So this makeup here, it amplifies by the same level that you are compressing. It's making an estimate, but that is not the correct value. It's okay. It's good to use that first here when we're doing the first initial. But let's remove the makeup now, and then let's increase the dB. Let's maybe start with 6 dB, and we want to have the same volume as we have without the compression. So there is with. And maybe a spectrum analyzer is better for the job when it comes to finding the volume. So this is without, and we're having a peak minus 10 dB. Minus 9 dB. So this is maybe a bit too loud. Maybe 5. Maybe 6 dB was actually pretty good. That looks pretty good up here. You see, it kind of looks like they're peaking the same now again. Let's stop that. And then, so we fix the, so it sounds, it's displaying at the same dB as before. And then it's the, we need to adjust the release here. And when it comes to the release, basically what we want, we don't want it around 200 milliseconds is a good starting point. But what we're trying to achieve here is if we have it too long, look at this gain reduction here. This is the compression at work. And we need it to zero out like it's doing here. But if we put it too long, now see, it's never reaching zero again from when it's starting. So it doesn't have time to, it's not restarting every time a new kick introduces. So that's no good. And can we start around 200 millisecond? And maybe for this kick here, I mean, it depends on how the waveform looks for the different kicks. But for this kick here, maybe like so. That looks pretty good. So we set the release so we know it's working throughout the entire tail of the kick here. So, it's a general, you want the kick to be nice and snappy. And a good guideline is 200 millisecond for the release. So at this point, we have set the compressor up. So now we can start making decisions here. And if you want like a smooth kind of a kick, then you can suppress the initial transients. Let's start it by allowing the compression to start sooner, right? So there it's removing all of the transient, but we can, make a decision on how much we wanted to allow it to come through. Maybe something like that. And then once again, we're probably going to need to minus 11 dB. And so probably need like another dB. Like that. And if you listen to it on off now, we do have you can see the waveform as well. This is the original, and then this is the compressed version. Oh, my sound, this is... So we have it like a perceived more, it's a bit fattier, the kick now. Sorry about this, I'm having some problem with the sound there. My sound card is on my Mac, and not on this computer. I'm getting another one for this. This is a PC here, and normally I make my music in the Mac. The core audio is a bit better than ACO, but that is for another video. So if you want to have a more smoother kick, then change the attack time. depending on how you want it. Slower attack gives you more of the allows the initial transients to come through, and a quicker attack suppresses the initial transient as well. And yeah, okay, so now once we are pretty happy with this, we can set the ratio to 5:1, which you know, it's not as heavy. And then again, so minus 10 dB, I need to reduce the so I'm just comparing and seeing here that the fundamental is playing at the same level as before, because we're changing the harmonics, right? The tone, we're amplifying those, but the fundamental needs to be at the same level as when we start. So after we have done compressing our sound, got a more fat body, I think I would say, we can use a transient shaper, which is it doesn't change the transient shaper. You can emphasize on the initial transient and also its body, but it does so in a special way that doesn't change its tone. It doesn't change the harmonics, which is pretty good. So a transient master, this one is pretty easy to understand. And then I do like to have the LFO tool so I can see what we're doing. And then maybe we increase the transients here to get a more snappy. So, and then we could just like something like that. And maybe now I'm going to take the attack a bit back on the compressor, allowing the compressor to actually be what's modifying the body here. And then after the compressor, I'm using the transient shaper to get back the transient of the sound. And the end result, if we let's group these here. And it's a good idea to save this as well, this group, and name it something like I have it named here, Ulion Drum Shaping. That's basically this rack here. But I want to save that, but I just wanted to do an after and before. So I need the tool to be back there. So come on. That is how the waveform looks after our shaping. And this is how the initial sound. So you can hear as well. If we listen, this is the original. So we have a more fatter body is the end result of this processing here. So let's just do a quick recap here of the information that I brought to you here in this video. So a compressor, it works by reducing the reducing by a threshold the limit of the level, and it amplifies the other frequencies below that threshold by the gain. And this ratio here, that is how much, like if it's a limit, then it says at that threshold, don't allow anything above that, like take the volume down to that level. But the ratio here is not saying take everything down, it's taking down by a ratio, so a 5:1, or and then that depends on what level it is, how much that is going to be. But so it's not completely taking it down to that threshold, it is just taking down by X amount. And we can shape the body and the initial transient with the compressor, and then also with a transient shaper, which transient shaper allow us to increase or decrease the initial transient end body without changing its tone, because the compressor is changing the tone, right? But that is because if you've seen the video on tone and timbre, a tone is the fundamental plus the harmonics, and the fundamental is the highest and lowest frequency of a sound. It's the one we perceive as the note that we're playing. So 55 here, that's an A, that's the fundamental, that's what we, and then what defines its character, its tone, is the harmonics. And when we're amplifying the harmonics here, we are changing its tone, basically. But so we use a compressor to shape its body and alter its tone, then a transient shaper to emphasize or de-emphasize its initial transients and the body. And you can use tools like the spectrum analyzer, and I like this LFO tool here to look at the waveform. I hope you find this video here useful, and if you like this sort of content, and please do help me out by subscribing, hitting the bell button, liking this video, and leaving a comment. I thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next episode, which is part 3 in the kick drum here, where we're going to do some EQing to the kick drum. All right, bye guys and girls.